everyone. My name is Hannah Bothner, and I am the Short Film Program Director for Tallgrass Film Festival. Today, we are here to have a Q&A session with some of the directors and filmmakers from our LGBTQIA+ short film program. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So we will start with James.
Hi, everyone. I am James Kautz. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the writer-director of Frankie.
And Shannon?
Hi, my name is Shannon. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her, and I'm non-binary. And I wrote and star in my own.
And Robert.
Hi, my name is Robert Philipson. I am the writer and producer of Smoke, Lilies, and Jade.
Well, wonderful. Okay, so going to start out with a question for all of you. We'll go down the line here. What was the reason you wanted to make this film? Where did you get the source material from? You know, if you wrote it, what was your inspiration? So we will start with James.
Well, right into the deep end. A few years ago, I got into Al-Anon. I really needed some support, and the first meeting that I ever stumbled into was this men's group, and it was truly transformative for me. It was the first time I'd ever been around cisgender men who were vulnerable and who had talked about their fears and their stuff. And this theme kind of emerged in the room, this idea that somewhere along the line, we had all kind of denied or been denied our authentic self in an effort to keep someone else safe, usually an addict or an abuser in some way. At the same time, my spouse, Morgan, who stars in Frankie and who was a producer in the film, they were coming out as non-binary and trans, and they were kind of finding the same theme in their life, this idea that they had known all along who they were, but had kind of denied that in an effort to keep others comfortable and safe. And that little kernel became the seed of our short film, Frankie.
Incredible. On to you, Shannon.
That's an amazing story. I wrote my own personal coming out story as a non-binary person. I'm resonating with a lot of what you were just talking about, James, in terms of facts we've always known about ourselves, but in order to not be rude or inappropriate, you keep them inside and you think to yourself, oh, everyone's just keeping them inside. But I wanted to make a metaphor about living in a binary society as a non-binary person, and I found myself gravitating towards the world of dance, and particularly ballet, where there's one clear men's dance and one clear women's dance. And if you ended up in a predicament where you couldn't dance either dance, you'd be screwed. You couldn't be a ballet dancer. And then the question that I posed from there was, well, then could you still be a dancer, and what would that dance look like? So I wrote a coming out story about a non-binary ballet dancer who is physically unable to perform the women's dance because they have a foot injury, but they sort of realize throughout it that the foot injury might be more psychological than anything. And at the end, they're able to dance their own dance and go up on point. And so long as it's in combat boots, it's okay.
Love that. And same question to you, Robert.
Thank you for having me in the Q&A. This is the second film in a series of narrative shorts that I have written and produced about the queer Harlem Renaissance. My work has been producing and directing, in the case of documentaries, films about the queer Harlem Renaissance. My directors and I, my directors are Quincy and DeAndre Gosfield. They're a directing husband and husband couple. excuse me, we did one 15-minute short before the pandemic, taken from a novel by the writer Claude McKay, who was bisexual. And then we turned our attention to Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, which was a short story published in 1926 in an arts journal called Fire, coming directly out of the Harlem Renaissance. And it was the first positive depiction of same-sex desire in American literature. So just a remarkable achievement in itself. It's stream of consciousness, so it took a little work to turn it into a screenplay, but we did it, we filmed it, and it's here.
I love that. So I have to imagine that you have a lot of knowledge and have done a lot of research on that time period. Can you talk a little bit about your research process? Maybe how you came across this exact poem to use, and what draws you to the queer Harlem Renaissance?
Wow, that's a lot of different questions.
I know, sorry.
Let me start with the latter, and it'll segue into my process. I was a professor of African American literature for a number of years, segued out of that into filmmaking, and so I had my subject matter. Being gay myself, I was always alert to those themes and those biographical details, which I ran into. Now, back when I was starting this project, which is the early aughts, there were mentions here and there. There's been a tremendous amount of research in raising a public consciousness about the queer contribution to the Harlem Renaissance since then. At that time, it was very scattershot. So I wanted to raise the consciousness and work on an overarching documentary, which I'm still working on, that brings it all together. So a lot of the research that I was doing, coming from an academic background, was a continuation of what I had done as a scholar. But I also started looking for visual images and clips that I could use to fortify my material. There has been such a revolution in what is available now that what was relatively difficult back in the early aughts, like finding obscure clips or obscure images outside of archives. Now you go on YouTube or you go on Google Images and you can find just about anything quite easily. So it's been a real revolution, and it's facilitated my research enormously.
Absolutely. And now, Shannon, do you have background in dance and in ballet at all?
No. So I was a musical theater kid. I was a dancer growing up in that way. I did jazz and contemporary, and a lot of contemporary in college too. And so that was part of I always say necessity is the mother of invention, and part of the reason why I chose to write the character to have an injury and be unable to dance, and it being about like their struggle to literally do the dance, helped me step into that role. And then I also had a ballet consultant, Helena Thordal Christensen, step onto the project, and she played the role of my feet in a couple different moments. And I did the contemporary dance at the end, and I helped choreograph it.
Oh, awesome. I was going to ask about choreographing too. So did you choreograph?
Yeah, no, we had a modern choreographer who I collaborated with her to make the piece because we wanted it to feel like it was entirely in my wheelhouse of expression. Because that was a goal of the end dance, to feel like it was raw, organic, meant to be in my body, versus the ballet dance was not natural for the character.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now, James, so your film has so much tension, and it basically, if I remember correctly, all takes place in the same room, pretty much. So I want to know how you got that tension, and then also how it seems like we have all of these, it's almost like an an ensemble cast, and of course there are these players that are sticking out, but how did you there, it also seems like each person has kind of a character, even if they don't speak a ton. Can you talk about finding those characters and working with your actors?
Sure. I think the whole film is kind of that ensemble of actors. When I wrote it, I don't know if at first I was conscious of it, but in the rewrites, I definitely became conscious of this idea that each character represents a particular man on the spectrum of masculinity, including Frankie. And so, it's not just cisgender men are bad and, other people are not. You have folks in there who are, in support of letting Frankie speak in this meeting. And just to give you both kind of, Shannon and Robert, an idea of the film, basically Frankie, a few days after coming out as non-binary, crashes their partner's men's only 12-step meeting. And they kind of refuse to leave. And eventually they share. And they go over their time to share. Usually when you share, you have 3 minutes, and they go past it. And then some of the men fight to let Frankie keep speaking, and some of the men fight to shut them up. And so, yeah, the men kind of totally represent different facets of masculinity. The casting was a dream. I mean, I cast they all have really wonderful credits, but they all have theater experience too, which is where I come from. And building tension in real time, that's what theater is all about. And so we rehearsed it like a play. We filmed it in some ways like a play, but the tension really kind of came through in the editing, just making sure that one line kind of really followed the next. And I'm so grateful that they all knew what the end goal was to like build to this cacophony, which is about 2/3 of the way through the film.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question is for everyone, and it is we'll go down the line again. What do you want people to take away from your film? There's all of these different things being explored in these films. Yeah, what do you want people to take away from it? We'll start with James again.
Sure. I think the movie is as much an exploration in codependency as it is gender. And I think there's a universality in that. So I hope that anyone can kind of watch the movie and feel like, oh, maybe I do need to be a little bit more empathetic or vulnerable, or, to maybe someone who isn't speaking up quite so much. But honestly, like, just to get personal here, like Morgan's brother has kind of struggled to know how to engage with Morgan since they've come out. And this is the power of film. Like, he's watched the movie and it's opened up a totally different dialogue, to the point where, like, just a couple of weeks ago, he texted Morgan, was like, hey, I met this person whose child is coming out and they're having a difficult time navigating it. Can I show them Frankie? Yeah. And like, Morgan and I stood in our kitchen and like got teary-eyed, and we were like, oh my God, like, who would have ever thought a year and a half ago, like, this would have ever been a possibility? So that's what I hope Frankie and all of our films do, like, just help bridge the gap between people who might not know how to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Same question to you, Shannon.
Wow. I just wanted to introduce a problem of limited space for non-binary people in our world, and suggest ideas for how to create space for non-binary people, by showing examples of relationships that feel free and like you can play and like you can be yourself, and then contrasting those with relationships where the person might not be intending to box them out, but through the perspective of this film, you can see how this person is restricted and boxed out of coming into their own identity. And I also wanted to create space for myself as an actor, as somebody who presents female, but does not feel that way inside. I wanted to have a calling card where I played somebody who both looked like me and felt how I did inside, and both of those aspects were honored. Because I see the future of casting to be very gender conscious and conscious of all genders available.
Absolutely. And Robert?
I want people to be aware of the relatively long history of queer expression and Black queer expression story that this short is adapted from is almost 100 years old. It's very sophisticated. It's very sophisticated. And the dilemma that the central protagonist faces, which is being bisexual or perhaps even primarily homosexually oriented, he discovers through fighting his way to his own desire. This is a story that's kind of eternal in the queer community, and you have this literary expression of it from 1926, and it's also the same struggle that young queers and not so young queers are going through today. So, and I think it's particularly important to a Black queer community that's more and more coming into its own and becoming more and more visible, because as my directors say when they're being interviewed, we didn't just drop in from nowhere. We have a history. So that's one of the things that I definitely want my audience to come away with.
Absolutely. So I have a question that I didn't really plan for this question, and it's a little bit selfish, but I always struggle every year with, do I create a LGBTQIA program within the festival, or should I get rid of it and just make all of those films integrated into other programs? Now, there are always, these different all different sorts of relationships and identities featured in other programs, of course. But I always think, if somebody is out there searching and looking for this kind of thing and maybe wants to go see these stories, I should have that program, just like if somebody wants to go see only comedy stories, that I should have that program too. How do you guys feel? Do you like the idea of I'm stumbling over my words here because I just thought of this. Do you like when you find out you've been programmed in an LGBTQIA block, how do you feel about that? Do you like that this is a thing that exists, or is it a little bit more antiquated and it should go out the door? That's a big question, I know, but James, you want to start?
Into the fire first. I don't know. I think obviously you've wrestled with it for a while, Hannah, because it's a complex question. I think our entire entertainment industry, everything in our culture has so skewed towards niche marketing, and it's made so many more stories possible on one hand. But also, if somebody doesn't identify LGBTQ plus, do they skip your short? It's a hard question.
Yeah.
I will say what I am certain is antiquated is the idea of best actor and best actress.
Yeah. That's the question a lot of film festivals are having.
Best female director. I think that is absolutely antiquated. So that I know, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know about the categories. I think it's up to each programmer too.
Yeah. Opinions on that, Shannon?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying about actor, actress. I was chatting with a friend the other day about gender conscious writing, sort of like drawing a comparison between colorblind versus color conscious casting or writing. So gender blind versus gender conscious. So obviously there are characters that should be portrayed by cis women and characters that should be portrayed by cis men, but having an active role in making those characters cis rather than passively assuming they're cis feels really important. But in terms of programming LGBT programs, I guess it is a complex question. I have no answer to it. I'll just come out and say that.
This is a like I said, a very selfish question. I don't even know if the audience will be interested in it, but yeah, I think it's a conversation a lot of people are having.
Honored to be part of it. I think that sometimes there is an assumption, often from straight cis people, that I would not want to be pigeonholed, but I'm like, no, it's who I am. It's not pigeonholed, it's just who I am. But I will add just one detail to the mix, which is that sometimes queer cinema doesn't know it's queer cinema when it's being created. When I wrote this piece, I don't think I thought of it as queer cinema. And I had changed my pronouns only by the time I got to post-production on this piece. Yeah, and my director also changed their pronouns after we were in festivals. So these things are fluid and they're a journey, and I feel that the programming needs to hold space for that as well, that we might be discovering, because that's what we do as artists sometimes when we bring ourselves into the work.
Absolutely. And Robert?
I want to follow up and agree with Shannon's remarks. I'm from a different generation from the rest of you. And the whole non-binary, gender fluid, choosing your own pronouns is pretty new to me. You know, I know it's been in the culture for a little while now, but I've been gay for almost 40 years. And, you know, when I now jokingly say, my sexual orientation is so boring. You know, I'm a gay cis man, end of sentence, you know. But at the time I was coming out, it was terrifying. And it was, you know, I think of necessity, categories follow people's human experience. And coming out as gay back then was difficult and complicated enough to sort of like suck up everybody's attention. Trans came a little later. Now we're getting non-binary. And yeah, eventually all this stuff has to be translated into categories and codifications. And you're right in the middle of it. So as, oh, and I also want to thank Shannon for referring to this section of filmmaking as queer rather than LGBTQIA+, which I find satirically, you know, I mean, I understand the desire for inclusiveness, but, you know, we have to stop with the alphabet soup at some point. And queer is, I like it. In terms of should there be a separate program for queer cinema in general film festivals, I would say it's situational. I suspect that in Wichita, you do need a separate program for queer offerings, because if there is a queer film festival in Wichita, I don't know about it. There are hundreds and hundreds of gay film festivals. You know, if you do it in Los Angeles or San Francisco, it's pretty redundant, right? But I don't want to be ghettoized, but I think in certain markets, there needs to be a signpost saying trying to figure yourself out or educate your parents, go here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for that reassurance. I don't know. It's going to be a conversation that I think we continue to have, that I think we continue to explore, but we will see. I don't know. The world's changing every day. Sounds like a song lyric. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap things up with my final question to you all. What is next for you? What are you working on? What can you point people to so they can see your stuff and stay up to date with you? I'm going to throw a curveball and start with Shannon.
Okay. I actually just finished shooting a pilot that we want to take on the festival circuit. It's called Reaper Land, and I wrote it and with my writing partner Tiffany Stevens, and I play the LA County Grim Reaper. And that's an example of a piece that I wrote gender conscious. So my character happens to have she, her pronouns, but most characters were written as they, them, he, they, whatever felt consciously correct.
Awesome. And James.
Sure. So Morgan and I just co-directed a new short that we are just starting to send out to festivals. It's a little darker, a little different. It's called The Bottom. And we are also growing Frankie into a feature. And I think I'm in the last few pages right now of writing. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully we'll make it in the next couple of years.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
And Robert.
I'm finished the development of 2 scripts, both of them narrative shorts. One of them is once again historically based in the Harlem Renaissance. It's called Bessie Shows Her Ass, and it's about the blues singer Bessie Smith. Excuse me, that's going to be the same team, the Gosfields and I, that produced the other queer Harlem Renaissance shorts that I mentioned. That's pretty ambitious, so the fundraising for that is going to be quite a task. But I'm very excited about the script. The other one is personal. It takes place in 1989, and it's about the final stages of a Black man in Washington, D.C., who is dying of HIV, and the sort of final scene between him and his white ex-lover, who has moved to the West Coast but comes back to see him, and finds out a really shocking revelation about the recent past and how he deals with that. And that one is, so I've learned from doing these larger historical set pieces how much things cost. So this is 3 actors, 3 sets, 3 days of shooting. And it'll be something that I can finance much more cheaply. But I think the script is quite powerful. We're actually scheduled for production in early December, and I'm excited about that.
Incredible.
Oh, and let me say one more. For people who are interested in exploring more of this work, I have a website. It's shogafilms.org, SHOGA films.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and good luck to you on your future projects as well. Good luck to all of you. They all sound amazing, so we will keep an eye out for them. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I want to thank everybody out there for tuning in and watching and supporting Tallgrass.
I know we're still recording, but can I speak to the other participants on the Zoom after you've stopped?
After we stop? Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing that now.